The space station called Prime was older than most civilizations. It floated in the darkness between three dying stars, a massive structure of metal and glass that stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Millions of beings lived there. Traders came and went. Ships docked and departed. Life continued as it had for 3,000 years. But at the center of the station, where no one walked and no ships flew, there stood a tower. The obsidian spire rose from the station's heart like a black knife pointing at the stars. It was made of a material that no scanner could identify. Its surface absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Windows dotted its walls, but they were always dark, always empty. The tower had been there before the Galactic Coalition claimed the station. It had been there before the first aliens set foot on its metal floors. Some said it had been there before the station itself, and that everything else had been built around it. No one knew who made the spire, no one knew why, and no one in 3,000 years of trying had ever survived going inside. They were the first to try. They were a species of telepaths, beings who could read minds and sense emotions across great distances. A team of 12 monks entered the spire during the early years of the Coalition. They wanted to understand its secrets. They wanted to communicate with whatever lived inside. 3 of them walked out 7 days later. They could not speak. They could not think. Their minds had been emptied like broken cups. They spent the rest of their short lives staring at walls and screaming at shadows. The other 9 were never found. After that, they were engineers. They believed in science and machines and things that could be measured. They sent robots first, then drones, then armored vehicles packed with sensors. Every machine failed within 50 meters of the entrance. Circuits burned out. Programs crashed. Metal twisted for no reason. When they sent a living team in protective suits, only one returned. He was a senior engineer named Ka, and he lived for 6 more hours after crawling out of the spire's front door. He spent those hours writing on the walls of the medical bay. He wrote the same words over and over in every language he knew. It sees. IT waits. IT hungers. Then he died with his eyes open and his mouth frozen in a silent scream. They came next. They were warriors. They feared nothing. Their entire culture was built around combat and honor and facing death without blinking. 20 of their finest soldiers marched into the spire with weapons drawn and wore songs on their lips. No one came out, but for 3 nights after, the station's residents heard sounds coming from inside the tower. They heard the warriors crying. They heard them begging. They heard them praying to gods they had abandoned centuries ago. Then silence. After that, the Galactic Coalition made a decision. They built walls around the spire. They posted warnings in every known language. They declared the tower a Class Omega anomaly, which meant it was the most dangerous thing in the known universe. They passed laws making it illegal to approach within 500 meters. And for 2,000 years, everyone obeyed. The station grew around the forbidden zone like a tree growing around a rock. New sections were built. Old sections were renovated. Millions of beings lived their lives within kilometers of the spire and never thought about it. It became just another part of the background, like a mountain or a river. Dangerous, yes, but easy to ignore if you simply never went near it. Prelate N had served as the station's administrator for 47 years. She was a species with 4 arms and skin the color of copper. She was old and wise and had seen many strange things in her long career, but she had never seen anything like what appeared on her security feed that morning. She was drinking her morning tea when her assistant rushed in. The young was pale and shaking. "Prelate," he said, "there is something you must see." She followed him to the security center, where a dozen technicians were gathered around a single screen. They parted to let her through. She looked at the image and felt her 4 hearts stop beating for just a moment. The obsidian spire stood in the center of the frame, black and terrible as always. But something was different. Something was wrong. There was a light in one of the windows. Not a reflection, not a glitch in the camera. A light. A warm, yellow, ordinary light, like someone had turned on a lamp inside a room that had been dark for 10,000 years. How long? In asked. We first noticed it 3 hours ago, a technician said. But when we checked the archives, we found that it has been appearing at night for almost 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Someone or something had been inside the Spire for 3 weeks. N turned to her assistant. Check the personnel records, every being on the station. I want to know if anyone is missing, anyone at all. Yes, Prelate. She looked back at the screen. The light was still there, steady and calm. As she watched, a shadow passed across it, a shape, a figure moving inside the tower that had killed everyone who entered it. Contact Coalition High Command, she said quietly. Tell them we have a situation. Tell them. She paused, searching for the right words. Tell them that someone is living in the Spire. The room fell silent. Every being there understood what those words meant. Someone had done the impossible. Someone had entered the most dangerous place in the galaxy and survived. And not just survived. They were living there, comfortably from the look of that warm yellow light. Anne stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she asked the question that everyone was thinking. Who? No one had an answer. Not yet. But somewhere inside that black tower, behind those dark windows, someone was making themselves at home in a place where empires had sent their best and bravest to die. Someone was living in the haunted Spire. And they had been there for 3 weeks before anyone noticed. Earl had never planned to see the stars. For 41 years, he worked as a custodian at elementary school in Duluth, Minnesota. He mopped floors. He fixed broken toilets. He cleaned up after children who did not know how to aim. It was not exciting work, but it was honest work, and Earl was proud of it. His wife had been the dreamer in the family. She read books about space and watched documentaries about distant planets. She always said that someday, when they retired, they would travel, see new places, have adventures. But got sick when she was 58. The cancer moved fast. By the time the doctors found it, there was nothing they could do. Earl held her hand in the hospital room and promised her that he would not spend the rest of his life sitting alone in their empty house. Go see something new, said. Those were her last words to him. So Earl did. He sold the house. He sold the car. He signed up with a company called Universal Maintenance Services, which hired humans to do cleaning work on alien space stations. The pay was good, and they provided food and housing. Earl did not care about the money. He just wanted to be somewhere that did not remind him of. The trip to Prime took 3 months in cold sleep. Earl woke up feeling like he had slept for a week. He was given a uniform, a mop, and a bucket. He was assigned to Section 47C, a residential area where wealthy aliens lived in expensive apartments. On his first day, a supervisor named Ka showed him around. Ka was a species that looked like a praying mantis made of blue crystal. He spoke quickly and did not smile. Clean the floors, empty the waste units. Do not speak to residents unless they speak to you first. Do not enter restricted areas. Any questions? Earl shook his head. Good, work begins at 6. Do not be late. That was it. No tour of the station. No explanation of the rules. Earl was handed a map on a small screen and told to figure things out himself. It was on his second night that Earl got lost. He was looking for a supply closet that the map said should be in Section 49A, but the corridors in that part of the station were old and poorly lit. The signs were faded. Some hallways did not appear on the map at all. Earl wandered for almost an hour before he found himself in a part of the station he had never seen. The walls were different here, darker. The air felt heavy and cold. His footsteps echoed strangely, like he was walking in a much larger space than the narrow corridor suggested. He found a door at the end of the hallway. It was made of black metal and covered in symbols he could not read. There was no lock, No handle, just a simple latch. Earl looked at the door for a moment, then he pushed it open and walked through. He did not know that he had just entered the obsidian spire. He did not know that hundreds of beings had died trying to do what he had just done by accident. He did not know that the door he had opened had been sealed for 2,000 years. All Earl knew was that he had found a very dirty building that someone had clearly neglected for a very long time. The inside of the spire was dark. Earl pulled out his flashlight and looked around. Dust covered everything. Old furniture sat in corners, broken and rotting. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like curtains. The air smelled like something had died, been forgotten, and turned to dust centuries ago. "What a mess," Earl said to himself. He walked deeper into the building, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The floors were made of some kind of stone, cracked and worn. The walls were smooth and black, like the outside of the tower. There were no lights, no power, nothing that looked like it had worked in a very long time. Then he felt it. Something was watching him. Earl stopped walking. He held his flashlight steady and looked into the darkness ahead. Something was there. He could not see it, but he could feel it. A presence, a weight in the air, a feeling like standing at the edge of a deep hole and knowing that something was looking up at you from the bottom. The darkness moved. It did not walk or crawl or fly. It simply moved like shadows shifting when a cloud passes over the sun. And as it moved, Earl heard something. Not a sound exactly, more like a voice speaking directly into his mind. It was cold and ancient and full of hunger. "Who dares enter this place?" Earl looked at the moving darkness. He had seen a lot of things in his 63 years. He had cleaned up after sick children and angry teenagers. He had dealt with broken pipes and flooded basements. He had watched his wife die slowly over 6 months. He had learned that most problems, no matter how scary they seemed, were just problems. They could be handled. "I am trying to find the supply closet," Earl said. "You are in my way." The darkness stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing happened. The presence seemed confused. It had expected fear. It had expected madness. It had expected the same terror that had broken every mind that had ever entered this place. Instead, it got a tired old man with a mop and a flashlight who just wanted to do his job. "What are you?" Earl sighed. "I am the custodian, and this place is filthy. When was the last time anyone cleaned in here?" The darkness did not answer. It did not know how to answer. In 10,000 years, no one had ever asked it about cleaning. Earl looked around at the dusty floors and the broken furniture and the cobwebs hanging everywhere. He had been looking for something to do, something to keep him busy, something to take his mind off the empty space in his chest where used to be. "Well," he said, "I suppose I could start here." He set down his bucket. He filled it with water from a bottle in his pack. He dunked his mop and started cleaning the floor. The ancient horror that had consumed civilizations watched in complete silence as a human custodian from Minnesota began mopping its prison. It did not know what to do. So it did nothing. And Earl kept mopping. Prelate Inn had not slept in 3 days. Her office was filled with military officers, scientists, and politicians, all arguing about what to do. Ships had arrived from coalition headquarters. Soldiers patrolled the corridors around the Forbidden Zone. The entire station was on high alert. And still, every night, that warm yellow light appeared in the window of the obsidian spire. "We should destroy the entire tower," a general said. He was a massive creature, covered in thick armor plates and scars from 100 battles. "Blow it up, end this mystery once and for all." "We tried that 400 years ago," a scientist replied. "The explosion damaged half the station. The spire was not scratched." "Then we use bigger explosives." "The spire cannot be destroyed by conventional weapons. We have records of every attempt. Nothing works." The argument continued. It had been continuing for 3 days. Everyone had opinions. No one had answers. N raised one of her 4 hands. The room fell silent. "Have we identified who is inside?" she asked. Her assistant stepped forward. He was still pale, still nervous. "Yes, Prelate, we believe we have." He activated a screen. A picture appeared. It showed a human male, older, with hair and tired eyes. He was wearing a blue maintenance uniform. "His name is Earl," the assistant said. "He is a custodian. He arrived on the station 26 days ago with a human cleaning crew. He was assigned to Section 47C 3 weeks ago. He stopped reporting for work. His supervisors assumed he had quit or died. No one filed a report." The room was silent. "A custodian," N said slowly. "A human custodian has been living inside the obsidian spire for 3 weeks. It appears so, Prelate." The general laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Impossible. That tower has killed the finest warriors my people have ever produced. It has broken the minds of telepaths and driven scientists to madness. And you are telling me that a human cleaning person is living there?" "Humans are strange," a diplomat said quietly. "They do not think like other species. Perhaps that is why the Spire has not killed him. Or perhaps he is already dead, and what we see is some trick of the entity inside." "There is only one way to know for certain," N said. "We must send someone in." The room fell silent again. Everyone remembered what had happened to the last teams that entered the Spire. N turned to a group of humans standing in the corner. They were Marines, soldiers from a human military vessel that had arrived that morning. Their leader was a woman named Captain Tors. She had dark hair and calm eyes and the look of someone who had seen terrible things and learned to live with them. "Captain Tors," N said, "your people volunteered for this mission. Are you still willing?" Tors nodded. "We are, Prelate. Humans have to look out for each other. If there is one of us in there, we are going to find him. You understand the risks?" "We do." N looked at the human soldiers. There were 5 of them, young and strong and brave. She hoped they would not end up like all the others who had entered that tower. "Go," she said. "Find out what has happened, and if the custodian is still alive, bring him out." Tors saluted. Then she led her team out of the room. The entrance to the obsidian spire looked different than Tors had expected. She had read the reports. She had seen the pictures. She had prepared herself for something terrible, something that would make her skin crawl and her heart pound. Instead, she found a welcome mat. It was a simple mat, the kind you might find outside any home on Earth. It was brown and worn and had the words "Please wipe your feet" written on it in English. Tors stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked at her team. They looked back at her with the same confused expression. "Well," she said, "I guess we wipe our feet." They did. Then Tors pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior of the spire was not what she expected either. The floor was clean. The walls were dusted. The cobwebs were gone. Light came from small electric lanterns placed along the hallway, connected by extension cords that ran up the stairs. "Hello," Tors called out. "Mister, are you in here?" A voice came from somewhere above. "Up here, 5th floor. Watch your step on the stairs. 3rd and 7th are a bit wobbly." Tors and her team climbed the stairs. The spire was larger inside than it looked from outside. Each floor was filled with old rooms and ancient furniture, but everything was clean. Everything was organized. Someone had been working very hard. They found Earl on the 5th floor. He was kneeling by a window, using a screwdriver to repair a broken frame. He looked up when they entered and smiled. "Company," he said. "Nice. Would you like some coffee? I have a thermos." Tors looked around the room. It had been turned into a small living space. There was a cot in one corner, neatly made. A small table held a few books, a coffee cup, and a photograph of a woman with kind eyes. The window Earl was repairing let in pale starlight. "Mr. Tors said carefully, 'Do you know where you are?'" Sure, some kind of old tower in the middle of the station. Place was a mess when I found it. Been cleaning it up. Sir, this building is the Obsidian Spire. It is the most dangerous structure in the known galaxy. Hundreds of people have died trying to enter it. Earl thought about this for a moment, then he shrugged. Well, it is not so bad once you tidy up a bit. Tors did not know what to say. She had prepared for many things. She had not prepared for this. Then she felt it, the presence, the weight in the air, the darkness moving in the corners of the room. Her team raised their weapons. Earl waved his hand at them. Put those down, he said. You will scare. The darkness gathered in the corner of the room. It took shape, sort of. A shadow that was darker than shadow, a void that seemed to swallow light, and from somewhere inside it came that cold, ancient voice. These ONES bring weapons into MY domain. Tors felt fear rising in her chest. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to get as far away from this thing as possible. Earl said firmly, "They are guests. We do not threaten guests. What did we talk about?" The darkness seemed to shrink slightly. "I apologize." Tors watched in complete disbelief, as the ancient cosmic horror retreated to the corner of the room like a dog that had been scolded for barking at visitors. Earl turned back to her with a tired smile. "Sorry about that. Gets nervous around new people. He has been alone for a very long time, still learning how to behave." Tors looked at the darkness in the corner. She looked at the old man with the screwdriver. She looked at her team, who seemed just as lost as she was. "Mister," she said slowly, "I think you need to come with us. There are some people who really want to talk to you." Earl looked around his little room. He looked at the photograph on the table. He looked at the darkness in the corner. "I suppose I could come for a visit," he said, "but I am not leaving permanently. Someone has to look after this place and needs me." The darkness in the corner made a sound. It might have been agreement. Tors decided not to argue. She had a feeling that arguing with Earl would be like arguing with a mountain. "A visit," she said, "that works." Earl nodded and reached for his coffee thermos. "Good. Let me just pack a few things. Behave yourself while I am gone." The ancient horror of the Obsidian Spire said nothing, but Tors could have sworn she saw it nod. The conference room on Prime had never been so crowded. Scientists filled every seat. Military officers stood along the walls. Politicians watched through video screens from distant worlds. Everyone wanted to hear what the human custodian had to say. Earl sat at the center of it all, looking uncomfortable in a clean uniform that someone had given him. He held a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He wished he was back in the Spire, where things made sense. A scientist named Ka was asking questions. She was very old, even by standards, and her telepathic abilities were legendary. She had spent her entire life studying the Obsidian Spire from a safe distance. Now she was sitting across from a human who had lived inside it for weeks. "Mister," she said, "can you describe what happened when you first encountered the entity?" Earl thought back to that night, the darkness, the voice, the feeling of something vast and hungry watching him from the shadows. "It was in my way," he said. "I was trying to mop the floor." "And you were not afraid?" Earl considered the question. "I suppose I was a little, but I have been afraid before. When my wife got sick, I was terrified. Every day I watched her get weaker, and there was nothing I could do. After you have felt that kind of fear, everything else seems smaller." The room was silent. Several of the aliens exchanged glances. They had all read the reports of what the Spire did to people, the madness, the terror, the minds broken beyond repair. "The entity feeds on fear," Ka said slowly. "It consumes terror and grows stronger from it. Every being that has entered the Spire has fed it with their fear. But you—" "I just did not have much fear left to give," Earl said simply. "I was tired. I was lonely. I missed my wife. Some dark shadow in a dirty building was not going to make things worse than they already were. A scientist stood up. His name was Rax, and he was an expert on precursor technology. Mister, we have studied the Spire for thousands of years. We believe it was built by the precursors, the ancient civilization that created most intelligent life in the galaxy. They built it as a prison. A prison for what? For, as you call it, the entity is a psychic parasite. It exists in a dimension beyond our own and feeds on the mental energy of conscious beings. Fear, madness, despair. These are its food. The precursors could not kill it, so they trapped it inside the spire and sealed the doors. Earl nodded slowly. So has been stuck in that tower for how long? At least 10,000 years, probably longer. Earl was quiet for a moment. He thought about what it would be like to be alone in a dark building for 10,000 years. No one to talk to, nothing to do, just endless darkness and silence and hunger. That is a long time to be alone, he said. It is a monster, the general said. His voice was hard and angry. It killed 20 of my finest warriors. It made them beg and cry and pray before they died. It deserves no sympathy. Maybe, Earl said, but have you ever thought about why it does what it does? It feeds on fear because that is all it has. It makes people scared because that is the only way it knows how to interact with them. It is like a dog that bites because no one ever taught it anything else. The room was silent again. No one had ever thought about the entity that way before. It had always been a monster, a horror, a thing to be feared and avoided. The idea that it might be lonely, that it might be acting out of desperation rather than malice, was strange and uncomfortable. Ka leaned forward. Mister, you said that is learning to behave. What did you mean by that? Earl smiled a little. It was the first real smile anyone had seen from him. When I first moved in, tried to scare me every day. Shadows moving, voices whispering, cold spots, all the usual ghost stuff. But I did not react. I just kept cleaning and talking to myself like I always do. After a while, started listening. Listening. To me, talking. I talk a lot when I work, always have. I talk about my day, about the weather, about whatever is on my mind. After a few days, started responding. Not with words exactly. More like feelings, curiosity, confusion, and something else. What? Loneliness, Earl said quietly, is lonely. It has been alone for 10,000 years with nothing but fear and madness for company. When I showed up and started treating it like a regular roommate instead of a monster, it did not know what to do, so it started watching. And then it started helping. Helping. Little things. Moving furniture when I needed to clean underneath. Pointing out spots I missed. Last week it started dusting the high shelves I cannot reach. Is not evil, is just lost. No one ever showed it another way to be. The scientists and officers and politicians looked at each other. This was not what they had expected. They had expected stories of horror and survival. Instead, they were hearing about a lonely monster learning to dust shelves. Rax spoke again. Mister, do you understand what this means? You have done something no one in the history of the galaxy has ever done. You have tamed a precursor entity. You have turned a weapon of psychological destruction into a roommate. I would not say tamed, Earl said. Is not a pet, is just a person. A very old, very strange person who has been alone for too long and forgot how to act around others. Just needs patience and kindness, same as anyone else. Prelate N had been listening quietly from the head of the table. Now she spoke. Mister, the Coalition would like to make you an offer. We would like you to leave the Spire so that our scientists can study it properly. In return, we will give you whatever you want. Wealth, a home on any planet you choose, citizenship in any species territory. Name your price. Earl looked at her. Then he looked down at his cold coffee. Then he looked at the photograph he always kept in his pocket, the one of smiling in their backyard on their 30th anniversary. Thank you, he said, but no. The room stirred, and blinked her 4 eyes. No. I appreciate the offer, but I cannot leave alone, not after everything. Is just starting to learn how to be around people. If I leave now, we'll go back to being scared and angry and alone. I cannot do that. Mister, you are talking about spending the rest of your life in a prison built to contain a psychic monster. Earl shrugged. I have lived in worse places, and needs me. No one else is going to take care of that tower. No one else is going to teach how to be better. That is my job now. He looked around the room at all the powerful beings staring at him. Scientists and generals and politicians. Creatures that had lived for centuries and ruled over vast empires. I am a custodian, Earl said. I take care of things that other people forget about. I clean up messes. I fix what is broken. That is what I do. And right now, the thing that needs taking care of is, so that is where I am going to be. He stood up and put the photograph back in his pocket. Now, if you will excuse me, I have been gone for almost a day. Gets anxious when I am away too long. And without waiting for permission, Earl walked out of the room to go home to the most dangerous place in the galaxy. No one tried to stop him. 6 months passed on Prime. The obsidian spire still stood at the center of the station, black and tall and mysterious. But it was not forbidden anymore. It was not feared. It was simply the home of Earl, Custodian First Class, caretaker of Precursor Heritage Site 1. The title had been N's idea. If she could not convince Earl to leave the Spire, she could at least make his presence there official. The coalition had argued about it for weeks. Some said it was madness to legitimize a human squatter living with a psychic monster. Others said it was the only reasonable response to an impossible situation. In the end, they voted to let Earl stay. What else could they do? He was not going to leave, was not going to hurt him. And the Spire, for the first time in 10,000 years, was no longer claiming victims. The barriers around the tower came down. The warning signs were removed. In their place, a small reception desk was set up near the entrance. Visitors could now apply for permission to enter the Spire, though the rules were strict. No weapons, no loud noises, no sudden movements, and absolutely everyone had to use the coasters. Earl was very particular about the coasters. The first visitors were scientists. They came with notebooks and scanners and a million questions. Earl showed them around the lower floors, which he had cleaned and organized over the past months. He explained the layout of the building, pointed out interesting architecture, and warned them about which stairs were still wobbly. Watched from the shadows, the scientists could feel its presence, that ancient weight in the air. Some of them were nervous. A few were terrified, but did not hurt them. It just watched, curious and careful, like a shy animal observing strangers from a safe distance. Is not used to visitors, Earl explained. Give it time, it will warm up. The scientists did not entirely believe him, but they kept coming back. And slowly, over weeks and months, they noticed something remarkable was changing. The entity no longer filled rooms with dread. The whispers in the darkness stopped. The cold spots faded. Instead, began to communicate in other ways. It would move objects to help researchers reach high shelves. It would guide lost visitors back to the main hallway by shifting shadows. Once, when a young scientist fell down the stairs and broke her leg, carefully carried her to the entrance using tendrils of darkness that felt, she said later, like gentle hands. The scientists wrote papers about what was happening. They called it the effect. A being that had spent 10,000 years consuming fear was learning to exist without it. The psychic parasite was adapting to a new diet, not terror but something else. Connection, purpose, belonging. Earl did not read the papers. He was too busy cleaning. The spire was large, and there was always work to do. He repaired broken windows and fixed ancient doors and polished floors that had not seen care in. He set up a small garden on the roof using soil shipped from Earth. He hung pictures on the walls, including several of that he had brought from home. Seemed to like the pictures. Earl would often find the entity hovering near them, studying smiling face with something that might have been curiosity or wonder. "That is my wife," Earl told it one evening. "She passed away a few years ago, cancer. She was the one who always wanted to travel, see new places. I think she would have liked it here. She always loved old buildings." Did not respond in words, but Earl felt something from it, a warmth, a sadness, an understanding that went beyond language. "You lost people too, did you not?" Earl said quietly. "The precursors, the ones who made you, they are gone and you have been alone ever since." The darkness shifted. For a moment, Earl saw something in it. Shapes, figures, memories of beings that had existed before the current galaxy was born. They had created not as a weapon but as a guardian. They had loved it. And then they had died and had been left alone in the dark with nothing but its hunger and its grief. "I am sorry," Earl said. "That must have been hard." The darkness wrapped around him, not threatening, not cold, just present, like an old friend sitting beside him in the quiet. They stayed that way for a long time. 1 year after Earl first entered the Spire, Prelate N came to visit. She walked through the clean hallways and admired the repaired windows and nodded approvingly at the organization of the old precursor artifacts that filled the lower floors. "You have done remarkable work," she said. Earl shrugged, just keeping the place tidy. "You have done more than that, mister. You have changed everything. The Coalition is already discussing how to apply what we have learned here. If one human can transform a cosmic horror through kindness and patience, what else might be possible? What other ancient dangers might be approached differently?" "I do not know about any of that," Earl said. "I just did what I always do. I showed up. I worked. I treated like a person instead of a problem. And that is exactly what makes it remarkable." She looked around the room, was there in the corners watching but not threatening. After a year, the entity had learned to be around visitors without scaring them. It was not perfect. Sometimes it still made the lights flicker or the air grow cold, but it was trying. That was what mattered. "The Coalition would like to offer you something," N said. "Not a bribe to leave. We understand that you are staying, but a gift, a recognition of what you have done." She handed him a small box. Inside was a medal, gold and silver, shaped like the Spire itself. "The Star of," she said, "the highest honor the station can give, for services to the Coalition and its people." Earl looked at the medal for a long moment. Then he looked at the photograph of on the wall. Then he looked at the darkness in the corner, where waited and watched. "Thank you," he said, "but I did not do this for medals. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because everyone deserves someone who will not give up on them, even old monsters in dark towers." He put the medal on the shelf next his picture. "Now, if you will excuse me, it is almost time for dinner. I promised I would tell it about Minnesota tonight. It has never heard of snow." And smiled. It was a warm smile full of respect and wonder. "Of course, mister, enjoy your evening." She left. Earl closed the door behind her and turned to face the darkness. "All right, where were we? Oh yes, snow. So in Minnesota we get this stuff called snow. It is frozen water that falls from the sky. Very cold, very pretty, always loved it. She used to make snow angels in the backyard. I will show you pictures." The darkness gathered closer, curious and attentive. An ancient horror from beyond time and space, settling in to hear stories about winter in the Midwest. Earl smiled and began to talk. Outside the Spire, life on Prime continued. Ships came and went, traders made deals, politicians argued. The galaxy spun on, vast and complicated and full of wonders. But in the Black Tower at the center of it all, something simple and extraordinary was happening. A lonely old man and a lonely old monster were becoming friends. They were teaching each other that fear was not the only way to live, that kindness could change anything, that no one, no matter how old or strange or frightening, was beyond hope. The universe was vast and terrifying. but so was a Minnesota winter. And Earl had survived 63 of those. He could handle anything.